أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us the opportunity to reflect on our journey to Him and purify on this journey, improving in our akhlaq, ethics and morality, ensuring that we resemble the beautiful attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and maintain the path that He wants for us, as-sirat al-mustaqim, that we ask Him for in every salat. We've been reflecting on the book of akhlaq of Al-Allama al-Naraqi, one of our great teachers of akhlaq, the book named Jami al-Sa'adat, or the collector or collection of felicities. I believe the translation has been collector of felicities or happiness, basically what makes us happy. As-Sa'adat as in the plural of happiness, not the singular. And so it's levels of happiness that we are meant to strive to achieve, and we're not speaking of happiness in this physical world or in this dunya, rather the real happiness, the eternal happiness. Yes, it starts here and reflects itself in the hereafter, because the haqiqah of dunya is the akhirah. The truth and the reality of dunya and the real reflection of it is the akhirah, the hereafter. The section in the book we reached after the initial introduction is where he starts explaining or elaborating on the different types of virtues and vices, and the which is considered in the categories that he specified as the second category, al-bab al-thani. And the initial part of it, he says, it is bayanu aqsam al-akhlaq, the different types of the akhlaq, and elaborating from there. And so he has sections in there. In the very first section, or this very first part, he introduces the different sections, and I'm going to share some of these titles. They are extremely important, these titles. So these are the things that we should be looking to understand through our discussions in the coming weeks. So the topics that he introduces in the second category, as I mentioned, are the following. He says, أجناس الفضائل الأربعة. We spoke about the four faculties, and for each faculty there is a virtue, a main virtue. For the faculty of intellect is to reach hikmah. The faculty of shahwa, desire, is to have what they refer to as iffa, al-iffa or at-ta'affuf, which is a state where one limits themselves when it comes to desires, worldly desires. One limits themselves to what's permissible. So is it okay to have desire for food? Is it okay to have desire to have a wife, for example? Of course, that is okay, but not to desire something that's not permissible. Okay? So limiting ourselves in the faculty of desire to what is permissible. And in fact, there are levels there, but the next level where it becomes only, not just permissible, but only when it is recommended, when it's sunnah, when it's the tradition of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Ahlul Bayt, the infallible ones. So that's iffa. The virtue when it comes to ghadab is shaja'a, bravery. Okay? It is, we're not speaking of, it is not brave. Nobody would praise somebody because they're overpowering a weak person, okay? Or overpowering a judge, a just judge, okay? A just judge is sitting there trying to do the right thing by the people, and somebody starts barking at the judge, excuse the terms, yeah? So that's not shaja'a. We're not referring to that as being brave. Nobody says this is brave, yeah? We consider that as oppressive, unjust, ignorance, jahl, and so on. So the faculty of ghadab, or the anger, and I had to explain again and again just to remind mu'minina mu'minat, and especially those who may have just joined us. When we speak of these faculties, the translation is short of what is meant by it. In fact, even the original terms have to be, even in Arabic, have to be explained. So when we speak of ghadab, we're not speaking of the state that we have. We're, sometimes one gets angry. We're not speaking of anger in that, as in that state, immediate state. We're speaking of a faculty, a part of the nature of the nafs that leads it to become angry or raged by certain things. And so that faculty is what we're discussing, not the state, not the moments of anger and rage. We're speaking of the nature of the nafs. And also with the wahmiya, with the faculty of wahmiya, the virtue of it is when we are, we utilize it in understanding the realities, utilize it in intending good. So then he says, now that we know that these are the virtues, the justice, on the other hand, now he introduces, in this category, he introduces justice. So what is justice? What is adala? He says adala is to make sure we allow our intellect, our reasoning and intellect, to be the one in charge, rather than allowing desires or anger or some sort of delusion and imagination to control our thoughts and decisions, therefore our actions. So justice is that state of controlling all the faculties by the aql. And here he introduces multiple theories when it comes to how justice is achieved. And I'm going to summarize it because he elaborates quite a bit, gives different theories and different scholars' statements. In summary, and we'll go with his theory, which is most modern, most, I would say, most balanced. He's considered all other theories and analyzed them, the theories that came before him, and came to this conclusion, where he says that reality of justice is the fact that intellect has been in charge, and he then divides our intellect into two aspects of basically thinking intellectually. One is the aspect that he refers to as theoretical, and one he refers to it as practical. How does he explain each? This is important. This is the foundation to the next stage, inshallah. We have to try and understand this. So he says, al-aql, the faculty of intellect, has two aspects to it. One is theoretical, theory, and one is practical, amal, al-nadari and al-amali, al-aql al-nadari and al-aql al-amali. This similar analysis have been put forward by many scholars, including philosophers and scholars of akhlaq, to basically identify two aspects to the faculty of aql. So what is aql al-nadari? Aql al-nadari, he says, it is to the theoretical. So in theory, our reason or aql, intellect, the theoretical part is when we have certain realizations of the truth that is out there, okay, with regards to akhlaq. For example, to know that truthfulness is a virtue, as-sidq, as the hadith says, an-najatu fi as-sidq, salvation is achieved through telling the truth, being truthful. Okay, so telling the truth is a theoretic. I mean, that knowing that telling the truth as sidq is a virtue, is a good thing, is part of the theoretical reasoning or intellect. Now comes the practical. Practical, he says, it's the decision that the aql makes based on that theory. So when we make a decision at a given moment that I want to tell the truth, therefore the tongue speaks the truth. Sometimes it could be thumbs, just a hand gesture. Telling the truth doesn't have to be uttered verbally. Sometimes you might write it, you might utter it. So the tongue, the hand, the body now is controlled by the practical aql, the practical reasoning, to tell the body to do the thing in line with whatever it is, in line with telling the truth. Because the theory that the aql has understood is telling the truth is a virtue, is the right thing, is akhlaq, is ethical. And obviously the opposite would be unethical. So this distinction made for the aql led him, or led scholars of akhlaq, to define adala outside of other faculties within the faculty of aql. Because sometimes the action may not resemble what we expect as justice. So he then keeps it within the faculty of aql. Aql understands, then aql commands. He says if the theoretical intellect controls the practical intellect or reason, then we have achieved justice, adala. And it's almost like a balance. That's why if you look at justice departments, what do they have normally as a logo? They have the scale. Yes, they have a scale because it is about maintaining the balance. Okay, that is adl. Adl is to maintain the balance. And so he then describes or explains what different sections he will be introducing in this section. One is the fact that al-aql al-nadari huwa al-mudrik lil-fada'il wal-radha'il, that it's the theoretical intellect that distinguishes virtues from vices, or identifies virtues and identifies vices. Another section is that we need to reach the balance, middle path, and avoid both extremes. We'll come to that. So these are important sections that he's introducing. So we have to reach the balance, the middle path, and avoid extremes. Another one, he says, he will be discussing the different types of vices and elaboration on that, and then the difference between virtue and vice, and the fact that the highest virtue, or the highest of all virtues, is justice. Although it is a virtue in itself, but all other virtues relate to this virtue of adala, justice. This is why we read in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ. We sent our prophets with clear proofs, and we sent with them the book and wisdom, or could be law, based on the translation, kitab or hikmah. And we also sent made sure that they had the ability of having even the iron here as an expression of implementing the law, if it takes even fighting for implementation of the law. All of that, why? لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ, so that people can establish justice. Qist is another term. It's a little different to the term adl or adala, but it's a bad balance. Qist is to be just, to keep the balance. Then so the highest, we said, level of all virtues, that includes all of them, is adala, justice. And he has a section here where he explains how one has to reform within himself or herself, and the highest level of virtue to achieve justice, basically, and says the most important level of justice in humanity, in terms of the human society, is the justice of those in power, the sultan, king, president. They can influence the whole society. If you have a good leader, typically the people would be implementing goodness. If it's a just leader, he will spread justice in the society. And we see that often throughout human history. Whenever there was a just leader, generally in their society, justice prevailed, and it was mostly, more common. And when it was not, then you find oppression on every level, even within households. With a good leader, good just leader, they can even influence justice within households, and vice versa. Also, he introduces the لا حاجة إلى العدالة مع رابطة المحبة. One of the most beautiful topics that we will be discussing, inshallah, in the coming weeks is this topic. He says, if we have love, you don't need justice. I once had a whole session on this topic, or we had a majlis or lecture on this topic, that if we have love, we don't need to worry about justice. Why? Inshallah, we'll come to that. But one who loves isn't thinking of justice, is about keeping the balance. Yeah? What about love? Love is about what? Any suggestions? What can you see as the product of love? Powerful product of love. I spoke about it last night. Any ideas? Sacrifice. Yeah? The product of love is sacrifice. We love our children. What do? We sacrifice for them. Okay? If you sacrifice, that's above justice. Justice, you look at them as equal. Okay? Therefore, you just want to keep the balance. What about sacrifice? You're not worried about the balance anymore. You're willing to give them and stay hungry. That's how parents are. That's how mothers are. Yeah? So sacrifice is above. And therefore, love is above justice. We'll come to that, inshallah, and how he elaborates on that. Very, very important topic. And many other topics within the fact that we need to basically acquire those virtues and not and implement them, implement those virtues, and not allow our tabi'ah, our nature, and our bodily desires, our anger, those faculties of the nafs to be overpowering us. The first fasl, as he calls it, or the first section in this category, he introduces the different types of virtues. He says, the nafsun natiqa, even in science, they recognize that any individual, any insan, has the ability to understand, comprehend, to reason, and also has the ability to act. Okay, so even scientists recognize the fact that we have this faculty of theoretical and the practical. This is where he introduces, we said, the different faculties of aql. So aql understands, aql commands. So aql has two faculties. One is understanding. Now psychologists, scientists, doctors, different people who study human beings from biological perspective, from physiological perspective, psychological perspective, they study human beings. They recognize that human beings have the ability to understand, intend. When I say even scientists, not just theories like psychological theories, but also experimental science, including medicine. Now, doctors would tell you, if a patient comes into the operating theater having hope that they would be cured, they come in positive, with a positive attitude to the operating theater, they're more likely to what? Have a successful operation. This is known amongst physicians and doctors who perform operations. Okay, so the question is, what is that state of mind that's affecting their healing, essentially? It is a state of mind that's outside the actual action of the doctor or function of the body even. The function of the body and the actions of the doctor are the same for all patients. And they come and do statistics and figure that some patients have more chances and some have less chances. And when they've done their work and stats, they figured that the state of the mind of the patient prior to the operation has a big impact on the success of the operation. Okay, so experimental science, psychologists, everybody has recognized the faculty of theory and the faculty of practice, the command. Okay, when the intellect commands the body. Now, what happens afterwards is not always up to us. Okay, we decide to do something, we intend, we comprehend, analyze, make a decision, make an intention and a decision, and we also command our body to do something. Okay? If it was up to our command, all of us here would be the top soccer players, for most of us. Yeah? In the sense that our command, we want to score right inside the goal. You know, we theorize, we understand, we command, but we come to the actual game, oftentimes we don't score. Okay, most of the time. That takes a lot more practice to master, you know, some art. It's literally an art. And physics, understanding the physics of things and how you have to consider the weight of now, do they study that? No, they do it with practice. Maybe if they were robots, they would study it and do it with less, more theory and get it right, even in terms of the speed of the wind, whatever else. Nevertheless, the intention of the aql, the decision, intention, and the action is not always followed by, you know, the results that we want. That's not what we're concerned about. In ilm al-akhlaq, we're looking at the theory and the practice of the individual, not the results. Okay, that's something we need to keep in mind. So, when it comes to nafs al-natiqa, they say that it has both the theory and the practice. The quwwa of idrak, he calls it, to understand, comprehension, and the action. Based on that, if one, with regards to all the other faculties, makes sure that they have controlled their intellectually, they understood right, and therefore they made the right decisions when it comes to action, controlling their other faculties, then they will come to the discipline which essentially leads to wisdom. He calls it the path to wisdom, hikmah. Okay, how do we reach hikmah? He says, if we have good discipline of the aql, and it has the capability of controlling other faculties. And therefore, if we do tahdib of the power of the intellect, we reach hikmah, wisdom. If we do tahdib or discipline of the power of the action, we reach adala. So for each of them, he has a title. The theoretical intellect, the discipline of it is hikmah. The opposite is lack of hikmah, not having hikmah. The practical intellect, disciplining it leads to what? Justice, adala. The power of anger, al-ghadabiyya, disciplining it leads to forbearance, patience, al-hilm. And from that, they reach bravery. Okay? Why does he say hilm then bravery? Because bravery should be based on intellect. Assess. That's why the hadith says, ليس الشديد من حمل الثقيل إنما من ملك نفسه عند الغضب. Or ليس الشديد بالصرعة إنما من ملك نفسه عند الغضب. The tough ones are not the ones who can overpower others in a wrestling game or carry the heaviest. You know, when they want to carry, do you see anyone with a smile and, you know, laughter? No, they put that angry face to carry the heaviest weights. Yeah, that's when you have to get the blood boiling in the body, or in a wrestling, yeah, or whatever. The Prophet says this is not shadid. This is not toughness. Toughness is to control your anger, to control that emotion within you. That's when one can, after controlling it, which is about Hilm, is basically, and in fact, Halim is not just, we're not speaking about the food, by the way. Hilm and Halim is not just one who, you know, is patient, forbearing, and waiting for, you know, not acting. No, what using intellect is part of it. Okay, so assessing, not reacting immediately, assessing, and therefore discipline of al-ghadabiyya, this anger, is to be patient, forbearing, and assess things, therefore act bravely at that point. Okay, so sometimes bravery is running away. Does that make sense? Okay, so they have a saying, you know, bravery, I mean, running away could be bravery. Because what? Because your shahwa or your ghadab and your faculty of ghadab in most instances is to face and fight. You get angry, you face and fight. What if you have somebody stands there with a gun? Is it brave to stand against it and fight? Huh? What is the saying? They have a saying: never bring a knife to a gun. What is it? Gunfight? Is that the saying? Yeah. So somebody, or not even a knife, a fist. You know, somebody's carrying a gun and you come out with a fist, and I'm brave. I'm gonna stand against you. Is that bravery? That's not bravery. At that point, it's very brave to run away, to control your anger and wanting to revenge and take, you know, or somebody, God forbid, kills someone innocent in front of you, and they have a gun. Is it brave to now fight them? No, it's brave to think what's the most intellectual thing to do, and do it then with your full power, with that basically controlling and realigning your energy towards something that is most intellectual, most wise. So he says the tahdib, discipline of the anger, is to have hilm, and from that comes the bravery. What about the desire, the faculty of desire? He says tahdib, disciplining our desire, leads to iffah, which means to only limit our desires to what is permissible. Okay, ta'affuf. Basically, it is, I desire this, but I'm not going to consider consuming it or doing it unless I know it's fine. And there are levels there. You know, some people are okay with doubtful things. The Imam of our time, in the dua, he says, فَطَهِّرْ بُطُونَنَا مِنَ الْحَرَامِ وَالشُّبْهَةِ. Purify our bellies or stomachs from everything that's not permissible and everything that is doubtful, shubha. So this is iffa. From iffa, he says, comes sakhawa. Basically, sakhawa is often translated into generosity, but not necessarily just generosity. Giving up something that we desire, part of it is generosity. Part of it could be sacrifice, you know, where I am hungry and another person is hungry. I give up my food so that they can eat. In today's world, I don't know what's happening. People are dying from starvation. How many people are doing anything about it? Very, very sad world that we're living in. And often people claim to be followers of the Prophet, Muslim, and yet they do little about others who are hungry, starving, literally. And some of us have the means. And inshallah, we utilize the means that we have to help those in need, those who are in desperate need and starving. So comes from disciplining the faculty of desire, comes iffa, which is perhaps translated into abstination, if I'm not mistaken.
If it's translated as chastity.
Chastity is would not see iffa. Yes, some people do use it, use chastity for it. However, chastity normally is not related to food and that kind of, or is it? Maybe I'm mistaken. Chastity is more about the desire, perhaps, desires in terms of, the sexual desires and things like that, if I'm not mistaken.
Because Iffa is purity, chastity, modesty.
Yeah, maybe modesty. Maybe abstination could be also another option for it, basically to stay away from anything that is not permissible. That could be food, could be obviously other desires as well. So it's not limited to one type of desire. And then he says after that comes sakhawa, which is to basically generously give up on what we like for a better cause, for the sake of God, because of sacrificing and so on. He has a little bit of explanation here. He says, if the actions based on all those faculties are balanced and all of them are obedient and in line with the theoretical intellect, then one has reached i'tidal, that balance, which is the same term, or from the same root as adl. Adl and i'tidal are from the same root. And therefore, they have reached the virtues of hikmah, wisdom, iffa, and shaja'a. And that's adl. And if not, if they fall out of the i'tidal, then basically they have not achieved adl or justice. And therefore, again, emphasizing that the peak of all the faculties is adl, alaykum salam. The peak of all these faculties is adl or justice.
محمد وآل محمد صلوات
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. So then, as we said, the reality of justice is when the theoretical or the practical wisdom or practical reasoning or intellect is controlled by the theoretical reasoning, which he called wisdom, hikmah. So hikmah is when we reach discipline and the intellect has reached its peak, understanding things, understanding what are the virtues and what are the vices, and therefore when intellectually, theoretically, our intellect has decided that these are the virtues. When the intellect makes a decision in accordance with that wisdom, then we are achieving adala, justice. So to achieve justice, the practical reason or intellect has to be obedient to the theoretical reason or intellect. So al-aql al-amali and al-aql al-ilmi or al-nadari, sorry. Al-nadari theory, my aql reached a conclusion, justice, truthfulness, love, for example, a higher level wisdom, yes? All of these things are virtues. Patience is a virtue, generosity, all of these theory now. Based on those theories, in certain circumstances, my intellect makes a decision. That is the practical intellect. Okay? So that we have the theory and we have the decisions in a practical situation. If our intellect in a practical decision-making situation is controlled by our wisdom or our theoretical intellect, then we reach justice. If not, then justice is not achieved. Okay, it's off the balance. So he says, essentially, حقيقة العدالة هو انقياد العقل العملي للقوة العاقلة. The truth, the reality of justice is when our practical intellect is controlled, is obedient to our theoretical intellect or the wisdom that we reached. If we reach wisdom, not ignorance. Sometimes, unfortunately, people, if they don't do tahdib of quwwat al-aqila in the first place, if we don't discipline our, and basically, which takes what? What do we need to discipline or to shape our, or reform or reshape our intellect? Quwwat al-aqila is knowledge. Okay? If we have knowledge, the true knowledge from the Prophet, Ahlul Bayt, Quran, yeah. We have the true knowledge and we make sure our understanding is aligned with the teachings of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt, with the teachings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran and the elaboration of the Prophet and his progeny. That's when we have reached wisdom. And it also takes tazkiyah, by the way, because sometimes without tazkiyah we mistake the ignorance with knowledge. We mix the two. We think we have knowledge, but in reality, God forbid, one may have ignorance. So, seeking knowledge and purification together, if we don't do that to reach hikmah, wisdom, then we think we have aql, we make decisions based on whatever reasoning we have, which may be in some cases ignorance. Sometimes you wonder, some people get on the minbar or YouTube channels and speak, and they mislead. You wonder, they speak eloquently. What happened? And they have some information. Lack of tazkiyah leads often to them thinking, and therefore you find them very defensive because they think what they have is aql. They think what they have is hikmah, is intellect, is wisdom. In many cases, it might be far from that, the opposite. So as long as we have achieved wisdom, and we make our decisions and practically act based on that wisdom, then we have achieved the justice. Yes.
On the dua says, بالحياء والعفة وعلى النساء بالحياء والعفة.
Yeah.
So the question is, how is it that it's only applying or addressing the women when someone can make the argument that maybe the males are the ones who need more of that because they might not be still in control or something along those lines?
Yeah. So that is one type of iffa. Okay, so that's why iffa sometimes translates to chastity. So just to clarify, so the dua of the Imam says وَعَلَى النِّسَاءِ بِالْحَيَاءِ وَالْعِفَّةِ. Okay, so the question is, don't we all need, in fact, in some cases, men need more control of their desires so that they don't commit what is sinful? Why is the dua addressing women to have iffa? So this is one type of iffa in this dua. So iffa, the general ta'affuf and iffa, generally, the general meaning of iffa is to abstain from anything that is sinful, any desire that is sinful, food, drink, any other desire, relationships, and so on. Abstaining from whatever is desired because it is not permissible is iffa. That's general. But there is one specific type of iffa, which is perhaps translated as chastity, and that is the part that is that the women are encouraged in this dua. Why? Because they have more power in that regard. Okay, similar to what the Quran says. Okay, this dua is in line with the ayat in Surah An-Nur. In Surah An-Nur, which is a surah that in the hadith we are told to teach our daughters, Surah An-Nur. Why? Because this surah speaks about specifically this type of chastity, okay, or iffa, this type of iffa, modesty and chastity, okay. So in that surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, tell the believing men to lower their gaze and what else? And protect their private parts. Yes? وَيَحْفَظُوا فُرُوجَهُمْ. And then what about the woman? And tell the believing woman to also lower their gaze and protect their private parts. Is that it? It continues. It says, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ إِلَّا لِبُعُولَتِهِنَّ, and don't show their beauty except to their husbands and the list of their maharim, those who they cannot marry except the husband. Yeah, so they're referred to as maharim because they're haram to marry them, except obviously as the husband. So the husband and the rest of the maharim. Okay. So there's an extra thing that is mentioned for the women, which is what? Zina. Why? Because they're made so beautiful and so attractive to the male. That's how God made them. Okay? And so they are encouraged to have haya and iffa. Okay? They are, they're more in control in that department. Okay? Therefore, the encouragement for them in that department. So iffa in that dua is specific to this concept, and that's why the context also explains the meaning. So haya and iffa, when they come together, iffa in this situation or in this context is more about chastity and modesty. Okay, but if it comes in general, iffa in many ahadith or ta'affuf in Quran about the believers, for instance, I'll give you an example. They don't want to show that they're poor. Okay. يحسبهم الجاهل أغنياء من التعفف. Okay, in the ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the believers, even when they're poor, the real sincere mu'mineen, muttaqeen, when they're poor, ignorant people think that they're rich. Why? Because of how they have ta'affuf. In this case, what is ta'affuf? Because they don't ask anyone. They abstain from asking anyone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, ignorant people think they are rich. Okay? Minat ta'affuf. So even what is permissible in this case, they're not doing. Okay? Because they're going a level above. So ta'affuf and hiffa is abstaining and staying away from things for the sake of God. Okay? In some cases, it could be haram food. In some cases, it could be haram relationships. Display of it is desirable, and this is how shaitan also comes in. It is desirable for people to be praised, so therefore it's desirable for them to beautify themselves. But hiffa in this case is wala yubdina, beautify yourself, yes, but for your husband and for those who are mahram to you. Not go out and in public, where it could be desirable in a sense because they get more approval, they get more recognition out there. Some have that tendency, unfortunately, unless they purify and control that desire. Hopefully that.
On a separate note, there is the hadith that says that women should not learn, don't teach your women Surah Yusuf, but teach them Surah Nur.
No,
So if we go with the with the broader sense of learning, should be for everyone. So why would you want to teach them something?
Yeah. So good, very good question. So there is a hadith that teach your girls the Surah An-Nur and don't teach them Surah Yusuf. Now, again, in line with what we've been discussing, it is not to not teach them the surah altogether. Okay, it is not to say that, okay, they don't read that surah. No scholar has ever given that verdict. No imam has ever said, don't, your daughters should not recite that surah. Okay, so what is it saying? It is saying don't focus too much on that specific story of immodesty and lack of chastity that occurred in Surah Yusuf, and let them teach them more and let them focus more on the concepts of chastity and modesty introduced in Surah An-Nur. That's actually in line with what we're discussing. It's not to say don't teach them the surah or the story of Nabiullah Yusuf, but when it comes to that, we should not be showing them, displaying to them in practice or in theory, teaching them immodesty. Okay, that it's good for a girl to basically lure men. Isn't that what was happening there? No, we teach them that it's not good for a girl to lure men. Winning, unfortunately, if we don't discipline, if we don't have those principles, what happens in schools and high schools is competitions often. Who's gonna win? This new guy that came. Okay, some of the things that have been told in terms of what happens in those environments is so absurd. You think like, why? But that's unfortunately how it is. If we leave things to nature, a man who is actually married or engaged is more of a target in such non-disciplined environments than a man who is available. Why? It's a competition. Okay? It's a sad competition. Okay? I can win over that person. This is about, again, the lack of discipline of both. These are, inshallah, we're coming to this. So there are virtues or there are vices that are related to multiple of those faculties. Okay. In this case, for instance, jealousy often is related to both desire and anger. Okay, the desire to have something and anger because I want to have rather than the other person. And we're not speaking about anger as a feeling, emotion. we're speaking of the faculty of ghadab. I explained this in the beginning. Whenever we say ghadab, or al-quwwa al-ghadabiyya, the faculty or this power of nafs of ghadab, it's that rage, it's that competitive nature that is within us. So between the desire and the competitive nature that we have, between the shahawiyya and ghadabiyya, one has jealousy, hasad, and therefore acts on jealousy, wanting to get what others have. Okay, and strip them of it. If I can't have it, they cannot have it. Okay, so this kind of behavior, all of these things are lack of desire. So the ayah, the hadith is saying, teach them the beautiful concepts in Surah An-Nur, and don't teach them the concept of a woman who's trying to lure a man. Okay, in Surah Yusuf. So it's specific about this. When it's put together, that's what we understand. Surah Yusuf has many teachings. Surah An-Nur has many teachings. What is the difference? What is the common denominator, if you wish? Something that is related somehow, and one is the opposite of the other. The relationship here is about those, specifically about chastity and modesty, and lack of chastity and modesty that is displayed in the story of that wife of the Aziz, the wife of the governor, Imra'at al-Aziz. As in the hadith, she is named Zulaykha, or in the Quran, the name is not there, but in the hadith, she is referred to as Zulaykha. So that's basically, it's about specific about that. And why your daughters? What's the why specifically your daughters? Again, in line with what we just discussed earlier, they have more power in this department to beautify the society, or God forbid, take it to the other side. Okay, when the dress code is immodest and the behavior is immodest, society goes towards that. Who is ruined? I often tell mu'mineen and mu'minat, ultimately, if we are to say who's benefiting the most from, I mean, everybody is, but in a very on a very large scale, women are benefiting from chastity and modesty. Why? Because lack of it leads to what? Broken marriages. Okay. Is that good for women? It's not. When men are exposed to so much, then there are all these dissatisfaction with, which is shallow, but that's the reality. That's how the society is nowadays. And so modesty and chastity, from one side, men lowering their gaze, but the other side, women not just lowering their gaze and protecting but also hiding the beauty that they can easily use and lure men with that. And so that's that is the purpose of the ayah, further explaining, the dua further emphasizing, and this hadith also in line with that as well. So here in this section, he says that some of the virtues and some of those vices are related to one, some of them are related to two, and some are related to three of those faculties. So the faculty of aql, the faculty of shahwa, ghadab, and as well as the faculty of wahmiya, or the what he refers to as wahm, delusion or imagination. He says, for example, jahl. Jahl is what? Jahl and ilm related to one of the faculties. Ilm, jahl, both of them related to aql. Okay, if we have knowledge, or if we don't have, we have ignorance, both related to aql. Ghadab and hilm, rage, anger, forbearance, patience, related to which one? The faculty of ghadab. The third one, he says, al-hirs, wanting more of desires, versus al-qana'a, to be content with what you have. Okay, these are also vices and virtues related to which one? Related to shahwa, desire. So again, we are now, these are the building blocks, the initial building blocks. We'll come to each one of those and we'll work on it, but we have to understand how it works. So he says there are some that are related to more than one faculty. For example, he says the desire to have positions, loving positions, hubbul jah wal maqam, to love political and perhaps societal positions, to love those. He says that could have both desire and anger, both the shahwa and ghadab, both faculties, the faculty of desire and the faculty of anger. Why? The faculty of anger or competitiveness, because he wants to have a higher position over others. Faculty of desire, because he knows with that comes money, with that comes fulfilling their desires of food and women and all of those things. Okay, so many people would fight to have positions and power because of wanting more, wanting to indulge in their basically pleasures and worldly desires. Okay, so therefore that particular vice, hubbul jah, loving positions for the sake of the position, is a vice, is one of the rada'il, opposite of fada'il. Fadila is the virtue and rada'il, radila, is vice. And interestingly, the term in Arabic is associated with filth. Rada'il are also the plural of radila, which is, itself is something that's filthy. So those vices or those bad traits, dirty traits of the nafs, include something like hubbul jah. Hubbul jah, again, if we break it down, it could be related to both desire or the faculty of desire and the faculty of anger. Hasad, we mentioned it earlier, jealousy. Okay, jealousy could also be related to both anger and desire. Why? Jealousy, he has something that I don't have. She has something that I don't have. I'm jealous. It could be just because of wanting what they have, or also because of animosity. And often that is a part of it. There is a level of arrogance and animosity which are related to the faculty of ghadab, anger, and therefore we have jealousy. That is why often they say a mother or a father, a loving mother, let me just put that there, which is typical, okay, but there are exclusions. But a loving mother and a loving father, a normal mother and a normal father would never be jealous of their own children. Why? If he's better than me, I love it. Okay, if he's stronger than me, I love it. That's what I want. Okay, if she is more beautiful than me, I love it. Because in fact, by nature, if we go back to nature, even evolutionary development, they suggest that it's part of us that we go and search for the partner because of the offspring. We look at partners based on offspring, unless we are just so blinded by desire. But generally speaking, and this is what the hadith says, تَخَيَّرُوا لِنُطَفِكُمْ, search and choose right for your children, for the offspring, لِلنُطْفَةِ, the seed that you want to put. You put the seed in the right place, then you have the... So why do we choose we look at the spouse in terms of their intellect, their physical appearance, all of these things. Why? A part of it is because of the children. So again, coming back to hasad is because of the lack of love or because of some level of animosity or competitiveness with the other person, and wanting what they have, desire. So both the faculty of shahwa and ghadab are combined in hasad. So again, some of the virtues and some of the vices that we will be studying are related to one, some of them are related to two or more of those faculties. He says, for example, when it comes to arrogance, he says, is related to three faculties. Okay? Three. Not one, not two, but three. One of them is obviously the anger, faculty of anger. Another one is faculty of desire. With a higher position, one would get more of the things that they desire, similar to loving positions. The third one is wahmiya. Wahmiya what? Because they think, again, we said there is that imagination, delusion. Arrogance stems from a delusion, an imagination of the self being better than someone else. Like Shaitan. What was his imagination or delusion that led him to his arrogance and jealousy, and therefore non-obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, open defiance, direct disobedience, almost like a challenge. What was it? He says, you created me, I am better than him. You created me from fire and created him from clay. So his assumption that clay is less significant, fire is more significant, that delusion, and his imagination or a delusion of wahm, that he is better than Adam, led to him defying the command, the direct command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and denying or rejecting to do sujood. Yeah? So this is why ghurur, for instance, is related to more than one of those faculties. Any questions so far? So then in the next section, in very brief terms, he says the faculty that is capable of comprehending and understanding, identifying virtues from vices is the theoretical intellect. So we said when it came to the faculty of aql, he divided it into two. One is theory, understanding, identification, and one is practical, decisions, when we make a decision. Yeah? Identifying truthfulness as a good virtue. Identifying lying as a vice, yeah, in itself. And therefore, deciding to tell the truth is the practical intellect, yeah, that decision. So he's saying the one that identifies and comprehends, understands what is the right, what is the wrong, what is a virtue, and what is a vice, is the theoretical intellect. And he has a nice statement there. He says the theoretical intellect is like an advisor, a counselor, sitting there having so much wisdom, not this old guy with a lot of wisdom, okay, sits there and tells the mind that is about to make a decision, that this is the right, this is the wrong, you should be doing this one, not that one, okay? It gives it the raw materials in order for it to make the right decision. And the practical intellect, he says, is like so the judiciary versus what's the other political? We have the judiciary and the what's the ministry? No, legislative, and then we have the other one, which is the ministers that actually implement the law. Executive. Ahsan. Good. Yeah, executive. So he basically says the first one is like legislative, aqlul nadari, the theoretical intellect is like the legislative. Okay, within ourselves we have that legislation, and it has to have the law, the correct law, ilm, not jahl, not ignorance, and then the executive, which is al-aql al-amali, executes what the theory is. The theory is truthfulness is the right thing. The practice is tell the truth. Al-munaffid. So it's a good analogy there that we could remember and use, inshallah. The next section, I will start it, and perhaps if we don't, it's a longer section, but we'll start it at least, and we'll do the introduction of it, and inshallah we'll continue in the coming weeks. The next section is very, very important. One of the titles that I mentioned earlier is that we need to make sure we achieve the balance, the middle path. Okay, so he says that for every virtue there is a vice. Okay, for every virtue there is a vice, but not only one. We'll come to that. He says, as we discussed before, for every virtue there's a vice. There's ilm. What's the opposite of jahl? Knowledge, ignorance. Yeah. Iffa, the opposite of it is sinfulness, indulging in desires. Yeah. Abstination versus indulgence. Okay. And other virtues that have the vices that are opposite. Then he says, however, for every one of those virtues, that is the balance, there are two extremes also. Okay? Two extremes. So there's a balance, and there are two extremes, opposite of it. And those extremes also are grades, levels. So it's almost like if you have the darts, what do you call the board that you play the darts on? Dartboard. You have a center, and you have many, many other levels. Okay? Imagine the center is the only correct one. Everyone else is a deviation. He says that's how the virtue versus vices. The virtue is that center, and vices are going away from the center. Either way, ifrat and tafrit. Extremism in both levels. Ifrat and tafrit are two words for extremism. In English, you have one word. Do we have another one? Huh? If you go to one extreme or the other, we don't have a second word. In Arabic, we have ifrat and we have tafrit. Meaning, you either go overboard with something or you go under, less or more. Both are wrong. Both are imbalance. We are to achieve the balance. He says, تحقيق الوسط. To make sure we achieve the wasat, the middle path, and avoid both extremes. And so he says, for every one of them, jahl is a opposite of hikmah, wisdom. Jahl is levels. Okay? Sometimes jahl could be extreme in one level, sometimes on another level. Example, we have this in dua, and we have this in the Quran. What is it? يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تقدموا بين يدي الله ورسوله. Yeah. What does it mean? Don't try and be ahead of God and the Messenger. Don't present your opinion against the opinion of God or the statement of God and the statement of His Messenger. Okay? لا تقدموا, some elaborate to say تتقدموا, to try and be ahead. And that's why in the dua we say المتقدم عنهم مارق والمتأخر عنهم زاهق واللازم لهم لاحق. The one who tries to be ahead of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt has exited the religion. مرق عن الدين. The one who stays behind, falls behind, is perishing. The one who stays with them is the one who is going to reach. لاحق, meaning he will get there.
So it means we should always take, the middle course. Ummatan wasata.
وسطا, perfect, أحسن, literally.
Ummatan wasata.
أمة وسطا, middle course. No, neither extreme. We don't go to either extremes. And when it comes to ilm, we don't think that we know better than the Prophet. We don't try to overanalyze. We don't try to Khawarij, what did they do? Khawarij, they thought they had knowledge. Okay? They went in an extreme level of Tawheed, which is very similar to today's Wahhabi or Salafi practices or beliefs and practices. Okay? Everyone other than us is a kafir. This is the only way. Even Imam Ali alayhi salam, they called him what? That he has to now seek forgiveness. He exited religion. Okay, according to them. Okay? So this is an extreme in one level of jahl. Another one is basically everything is simple, taking things so easily. There is no need to even study. You just read a few things and you make your own, you form your own opinion. Okay, we don't need scholars. Okay, from one level of basically taking things so literally and being so dry in their mind to so much mellow. Okay, so everything is flexible. We can interpret everything. So there's no standard anymore. Okay, both of those are jahl. Both extremes. The middle, in this case, is Allah wa Rasulih, God and the Messenger. By extension, Ahlul Bayt, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim ajma'in, because they are the command of Rasulullah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa alayhi. And so, he says when it comes to, for example, the faculty of the anger or the ghadab, there is one extreme where one is coward, another one is reckless. Okay, the middle path, bravery. Okay, makes the right decision bravely, not recklessly. Yeah. When it comes to the shahwa, the faculty of desire, he says there's one who indulges with no limits, sharah, and one who even makes what's permissible haram. Okay, another extreme. One that's abstaining from marriage, for example. Why? Because I want to get closer to God. Who said that? Who told you that that's a good practice? Okay, or one who's traveling in the month of Ramadan and refuses to break their fast. There was a group at the time of the Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They were traveling. It was the month of Ramadan. They were traveling. The Prophet said, "Let everyone break their fast. It's no longer applicable." And some people refused. They said, "It's the month of Ramadan. We don't break our fast." The Prophet said, "These are al-usat." Okay, a title. He gave them a title of the disobedient ones. That's their nature. Their nature is disobedience. Okay, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ. So, to be on the middle path in every faculty and not go to either extreme. Either extreme is a radila. Either extreme is a vice. So the virtue is the middle path, and any extremism is a vice. And therefore he says, فَالْفَضَائِل, all the virtues are the middle path. Literally like what? Can you think of something in the Quran? اهدنا الصراط المستقيم. Literally like الصراط المستقيم. He says, صراط المستقيم. صراط المستقيم in the Quran is one. What about the wrong paths? Many. Quran says, when it comes to the wrong path, السبل تفرق بكم السبل. There are many paths. But when it comes to the right path, صراط المستقيم, one. Okay? So that is the balance, everything of it. The example given in the riwayat is what? What is the example given in the riwayat about Sarat al-Mustaqim? What is the description? Anyone? It's telling you where you can find the answer. What is the example given in the riwayat for Sarat al-Mustaqim? Yeah, but what is the description of the Sarat itself? Huh? It is thinner than hair and sharper than the sword. Yes? You've read this hadith, yes? It's thinner than hair, sharper than a sword. Meaning what? It's very difficult to achieve it. To keep on the... In fact, it's not just about getting there. So we said we have al-hikmah or al-aql al-nadari, which is al-hikmah, theory. And we have what? Al-aql al-amali, practice. Now you identified it. What is more difficult is to stay on it. You identify Sarat al-Mustaqim is one thing. Staying on it is another. I know this is the right path, but stay on it. And continuously fight your desires and your anger and rage and your competitiveness, and make sure you stay on there. You've identified it. That's not enough. You need to make sure continuously you make the right decisions. Al-aqlul amali, the practical intellect, making the right decision continuously. So then he says, for every virtue, there are extremes of vices, la mutanahiya, unlimited on each side. You can go to either extreme with no limits. Okay, many levels. Like the dartboard, imagine it keeps going. Okay, and what do we need to achieve? The center. Keep on the center. Not just identify. I know that this is the right one. I identified it. My vision is now clear. I can see it. Now, stay on it. Stay focused. Okay, don't lose focus. And so the example he uses here is from Surah Hud. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Hud, he says, ayah 112, he says, فَاسْتَقِمْ كَمَا أُمِرْتَ. Istiqama is to stay firm, steadfast. Okay? Stay standing. As you have been commanded. The Prophet about this surah, about this ayah specifically, he says, شَيَّبَتْنِي Surah Hud. Surah Hud has brought gray hair to me. Why? Because it's so tough. The command is very tough. فَاسْتَقِمْ كَمَا أُمِرْتَ. Stay on the right path. Steadfast. Stay focused as you have. And umirt is a command from God. Staying on divine command. As you have been commanded, stay focused on the right path. He says this part is what has brought gray hair. Stress and gray hair. Stressed me. You know, stressing for the sake of God is good. but stressing for worldly things is what brings us trouble. Stressing for the sake of God brings us a level of happiness, okay, living on a different level completely. But stressing for worldly things is what brings all sorts of, I guess, depression and anxiety and so on, which we are needless of. So he says, finding the right middle between all the different extremes and staying on it is difficult. Not just finding it, but also staying, remaining on it. And we mentioned that it is, as we said, it is very thin and it's very sharp. Now, some, and I have to make this very clear, some, they suggest that this description of Sirat is only metaphorical. There's no truth to it. These people, even when it comes to paradise, they describe paradise as very metaphorical. Everything in paradise is metaphorical. Okay, that is that is basically, according to our great scholars, including him and many of our great ulama al-akhlaq, they, or mufassirin even, they say this would be a deduction with no proof. You know, we're making an assumption with no proof from the Quran to say this is all metaphorical. Yes, there is another level of haqiqah to it besides the surface. We're not denying the surface. Okay, so Sirat al-Mustaqim is that thin path, a bridge that is so thin and so sharp, so difficult to remain on it. Okay, it may have its physical reality, we cannot deny it. However, also on the interpretation of it, or the practical implementation of it, is in this world staying steadfast on this ethical middle path that we should be staying on, that he is, that we are to identify and practice, that we are actually studying in order to identify and therefore practice being on it. Because if we are on it here, we will be on it on the day of judgment. If we're on that middle path, Sirat al-Mustaqim here, then on the day of judgment, it'll be easy passing on that thin bridge, no matter how sharp it is, because passing on it requires certain skills and tools that are given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On that day, if we did our job right, if we've done our job right here, on that day, he will give us what it takes to pass over the Sirat. Now, interestingly, if we think of the Sirat, what is the description? The Sirat is passing over what? Huh?
Fire.
The bridge is passing over the fire, hellfire, yes? And how is the hellfire? Is it one level or many levels? It's many levels. So he's saying similarly, and you could fall either side. When you're on a bridge, you can fall left or right, and on each side you go different depths. Yeah. So similarly, this middle path and being the virtue al-fadila, and the opposite of it, or the radila or the rada'il that are related to that fadila, are like the two sides, two extremes, and depths that are so many. It's not just one level of extremism, it could be many levels of extremism. He says كَالْجِسْرِ عَلَى الْجَحِيمِ, and the image of it is the Sirat. The image of the Sirat is that middle path, and the extremes are the atraf, the sides of the Sirat that is described in the Holy Quran. I think we should, we will open for questions or any comments. I know it's a lot of material. So
There was a question on
Yeah.
the justice side
mhm.
that had been posed. So it was about why was Imam Ali asked not to revolt during his time? Isn't it that we should stand up when there is injustice? So why was he silent, for example? And also, why was he against the assassination of Uthman?
Mhm.
That was one question.
Ahsan. So historically, there are many instances where not just Imam Ali alayhi salam, in the examples you've given, I'll just reiterate the question. So why did Imam Ali alayhi salam not rise against injustice or stand up against injustice after the demise or the departure or the martyrdom of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And also, why did he stand against or suggest that Uthman should not be assassinated, or he disagreed with it? The examples of Anbiya and Awsiya who did not rise against injustice that was happening in their society due to circumstances are many. Okay, we cannot even sit in one setting or even in hours and list them. Okay, from the time of Nabiullah Nuh ala nabina wa alayhi salam, and how his people treated him and how they treated the believers and how they had to continue guiding the people and not stand against them, not fight them. Never did he carry the sword and start fighting these people. Okay, they harmed him, they beat him to death. Every time they would throw his body, according to the riwayat, almost like a dead body in front of his house. And so some of his family members would take him in and nurse him. And when he would heal, he would come back and invite his people again. Okay, and many of the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it happened. Okay, some of them had to flee the scene and run away from their people. Okay, others had to live in peace amongst the people and not stand up against injustice. And some of them had to, in some cases, have peace treaties and agreements with the oppressors. We have that in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So when they killed, a lot of people do not read history analytically. They read it just from the lens of the school of thought that they belong to, without any analysis. One of them is here. At the time of the Prophet, early invitations of Islam, the parents of Ammar ibn Yasir became Muslim, and Ammar became Muslim. So they were taken and tortured because they were of a lower class in Quraysh. They were taken and tortured, and they continuously tortured them until they killed Ammar's father and Ammar's mother, right in front of his eyes. And Ammar had to decide, either he utters the names of their idols respectfully, or he is also killed. And so eventually he decides that he should save his life. Okay, when he came to the Prophet, he was regretful. He was crying, regretful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed Quran that you're perfectly fine. I'm just summarizing or paraphrasing. The ayat says, إِلَّا مَنْ أُكْرِهَ وَقَلْبُهُ مُطْمَئِنٌ, except one who is forced while his heart is at peace. Basically knows that God is one. He knows that these are idols. He denies them in his heart, but he had to say. So at that moment, the Prophet is one of Bani Hashim. Bani Hashim still had power. Why didn't the Prophet carry a sword and bring some of his cousins and go and kill or fight Quraysh, Abu Jahl, and whoever else was responsible for killing those innocent souls? Why did he not? Okay. So this is Again, when they point the finger at Imam Ali alayhi salam, we're not trying to say, well, the Prophet did the wrong thing as well. No. Wal-'iyadhu billah. We're saying this is perfectly right. This is fine. This is how human beings are meant to be in certain circumstances. And that's why we study the history and define the circumstances that the Prophet was in when he signed a peace treaty, and the circumstances that he was in when he decided to come and fight in Badr or in Uhud. Yes, he had to make a decision. Badr had two Badr al-Sughra and their big Badr. Okay, Badr al-Sughra, they wanted, the Prophet told a group of the believers to go and confiscate the goods that are taken by Quraysh, most of which belongs to the believers who migrated, forcefully had to leave their homes because otherwise they were tortured and killed. So he said, go and confiscate that. And they redirected and decided that they would come with an army to now retaliate. Abu Sufyan goes and prepares an army, comes to fight the believers, 1,000 soldiers, over 313 men walking with sticks, and some of them with swords. Not all of them had swords. 1,000 soldiers with horses and ammunition versus those people. So who was the mu'tadi? Who was the transgressor? Okay, the Prophet had to defend. The believers had to defend. Yes, they defended and defeated the enemy bi'idhnillah, with the permission and help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in one situation, the Prophet signed a peace treaty. He had more people with him, by the way. When he signed Hudaybiyah, he had way more people and ammunition. But he decided the circumstances now necessitate a treaty that would give them more power, that would lead to the real end of this stage, or this era of Quraysh having control and bringing tribes against him and so on. He ended it through the peace treaty. So we have to understand the circumstances, and therefore Imam Ali alayhi salam, right after the departure of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if he was to fight, they would have destroyed Islam completely. Okay, it would have gone in the wrong direction completely. So the Prophet knew that, he knew that, and therefore the Prophet told him, and he acted according to the wasiyah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why not assassinate Uthman? No assassination is fine unless it goes through a court. Okay, in Islam, Uthman did the wrong thing. Okay, bring him to court, judge, decide. Okay, not just assassinate. Okay, the Imam was against that assassination because it should not be the way. The right way is not to come and rebel and, kill. The right way is, okay, you want to bring someone to justice, you can stand and basically protest. So when they came and protested, that was fine. But when they attacked the house and killed him, assassinated him, and in fact, his history, analytical history, leads us to believe that the people who killed him were his own people, or his son-in-law, Marwan. And the goal was to divert the direction and get Bani Umayyah to be in charge, and they themselves to be in charge. There are many evidences to that, and some very good work has been done recently in that regard, but the assassination was never the way.
So this Osman, the son-in-law, Marwan bin Hakam.
Yes. Yeah. And they're Hakam ibn al-As. This is the other branch of Bani Umayyah. So there's the branch of Bani Abi Sufyan, and there's the branch of Marwan, or the Al-As, the Al-Hakam ibn al-As. Inshallah, we will conclude here. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله